Hello, folks. It's Corporal Hot Pockets again, and I want to show you what I've been working on with my beautiful 3D printer for the last few days. Over here, we got quite the UNSC Fleet assembled. I want to just show you guys what it looks like, as well as just general detail about what I was thinking about when I was making this. Because, as the man, the myth, the legend, Bob Ross told us, whenever you're making these, I'm not going to butcher his accent. Whenever you're making these, always have little stories in your mind. Uh, that's kind of what I'm thinking here. Now, over here, these small piles, about 4 frigates each. So we got 20 frigates per row, 2 rows. So that's 40 frigates. You can tell that they're parish frigates based off their unique shape. I hope you guys can see that properly. Very fragile. Fortunately, I was able to make them properly so that none of them broke this time. Uh, and you can see just how small they are compared to the rest of the ships. Just by the way, uh, all the ships are to scale with each other. They were all built around the Punic, which was made to the maximum size that my 3D printer would allow. Punic is 4 kilometers, which is 7.5 times longer than these frigates. So yeah, that's why it's so small, and that just shows the scale of UNSC ships. Because most often, all we see are these little frigates. But then we have bigger ships like cruisers, destroyers are in between, but yeah, carriers, super carriers, phoenixes, everything. And we're gonna go uh, look at each individual ship as well as just their size and unique features about them. So we're first gonna look at the frigates next to the Punic, the smallest and the biggest, and you can see the Punic utterly dwarfs the size of these ships. I mean, it's utterly gigantic next to them. Um, able to see the triple turrets, the breakwaters on the front, which are the same size as the breakwaters on the Epoch. So that's how you know the ships are to scale. And I mean, just looking at the Punic, look at the forward muzzle, look at the underside, look at the engine cone. Which I mean, the ship is taller than each frigate. So it's utterly massive and utterly beautiful. Now, an interesting feature about the Punic is kind of like a precursor to the Infinity. It was able to carry frigates not internally but attached to it, and this is what each of these 4 pads over here do. Is they are meant to hold a frigate. Now, mine broke, but the actual Punic model has a strut going from here to here across this gap. Well, I mean, I call it a strut, but in actuality, it's a metal bar or compartment, I guess, that's over a kilometer long, dozens of meters wide. So yeah, it's a lot bigger. But yeah, and the Puna could carry like so. I mean, just look how tiny. Again, these are all to scale. I double checked, but I mean, just look how tiny the frigate is compared to the Punic. And this shows that the UNSC did have some big ships. Obviously, the frigates were tiny by, and when facing the Covenant, the frigates were tiny by their standards. But the Punic was a respectable sized ship, both in size and in firepower. The two Supermax. I mean, no Covenant ship up until the CSO could tank that. If they could actually get hit. And I mean, the Covenant had massive doctrinal and technological advantages, intersystem jumps, heavy shielding, more maneuverability, more weapons. But the UNSC, they could still sometimes hold their own. Again, these with these Punics, problem is that these are incredibly expensive and rare. I mean, just again, the frigate and the destroyer, but I didn't have any. The destroyers and frigates are like the go-to ships of the UNSC, and you can just see the size difference and just the resource difference it takes to build each one of these. We don't have confirmed numbers for how many Punics were built. Honestly, I don't see them building more than 8, 10, or 12 at most. Like these things are, I mean, they're super carriers, but they're the size difference. So, like in the modern U.S. Navy, that has like I think 370, maybe 400 ships. It has like 10 or 11 super carriers. Um, but the size difference between, like, say, the frigates and submarines on the smaller side versus the super carriers isn't as big as this. This is just utterly massive. And I mean, there's some advantages that come with that gigantic carrying capacity, massive firepower, immense durability, and such. So there's advantages, but definitely a very blunt and very large weapon. Um, and our next ship is going to talk about mitigating these. Alrighty, folks, I've moved the Punicle to the side just because it's so massive, and I brought 2 ships out that help fulfill the Punic's role as a command ship on an intermediate level. Number one is the Epoch class. It's a heavy carrier. Um, it's got some powerful weapons, but it's mostly carrying designed to carry fighters and as act as a large command ship. It's 2.5 kilometers long, which is, I mean, if you compare it to the Punic, this would already be one of the largest ships that most people would see in the UNSC. You can see it's a little over half the length of the Punic, so Punic's just utterly gargantuan. But the second ship here that I brought is the Valiant class super heavy cruiser. So this is a cruiser class ship, a lot smaller, and under UNSC doctrine, carriers are meant to be command ships within their fleets, and the cruisers are meant to be the backbone of that, as well as main firepower. But what the Valiant did is it's an interesting combination of the firepower of a heavy cruiser, two Mac guns, four nukes, bunch of missiles and such. But it's got the large command suites and such, and sensor arrays of a command ship, and that's because for the UNSC they had a problem, especially during the insurrection and early Covenant War, problem of massive carriers being huge targets, as well as being rare in the fleet. Sorry. Uh, so yeah, the large carriers and super carriers you can see are far more resource intensive and far fewer. So what the Valiant was meant to do is have the firepower of a heavy cruiser, so that wouldn't be completely defenseless, but also have the command and sensory assets of a large fleet command ship in a much smaller package. And this ended up being a pretty successful, although albeit pretty expensive, design. With one notable example of this being used to its fullest, being the UNSC Everest, being uh, Admiral Preston Cole's command ship, leading one of the largest UNSC fleets. And the Everest was able to show its advantages to the maximum with having the speed and maneuverability of a smaller cruiser, but having the sensory and command capabilities of a supercarrier. And it's not known how Preston would have done if he had a larger ship like the Epoch or the Punic, but it is likely that it would have been a bigger target. It would have been uh, more unwieldy. So who knows? Either way, this ship has its purpose, and what I'll be using it within my fleet is primarily as, I guess, delegating. So it'll be like a command ship, or help distribute command from the flagship within the rest of the fleet, and I'll have it as leading smaller task groups within the overall fleet. Alrighty, what I got here is actually the main purpose of the fleet. I've designed this fleet to be as an expeditionary fleet that would carry a Marine expeditionary unit with it, which, in case you folks don't know, is a Marine division, a logistics. I don't know the proper term for this logistics unit, but the large ones, the biggest ones, divisional level ones, as well as an air wing. Combined, it's like 30,000 or so troops, and it's a flexible multi-role force that has the heavy firepower of a Marine division. It's got logistical support, air support, plus it's got the ships as well. 50 ships right now to support it, and this Marine unit will be carried primarily amongst these three ships, the two Phoenixes and the Punic. Now, obviously, the Phoenixes are assault carriers, or whatever I don't know the proper designation for them, retrofitted colony ships, but they act as assault carriers, or yeah, landing in helicopter docks, I guess, kind of like the America class, USS Wasp, those kinds of ships, except they're utterly gigantic, 2.5 kilometers long, automated robotic factories, tons of support, assets. Um, Now I'm saying that each of these ships will be carrying a Marine Expeditionary Brigade within it, which is it's a subsection of basically the Marine Expeditionary Force, which is about 15,000 troops. That's a little more than what we see them carry in Halo Wars, which is the only time we see these in combat with the UNSC Spirit of Fire. We see them carry 9,000 troops plus 3,500 ship crew. Now 15,000 is a bit higher than that, plus obviously the crew. But honestly, based off the size of the ships, as well as comparing them to the size of modern day assault carriers and what they carry, I think that they can more than carry all those troops and all their stuff. So I'll have two in each. I think there's three Marine Expeditionary Brigades in each Marine Expeditionary Force. So two of them are in each of the Phoenixes, which are dedicated assault carriers. The last one is in the Punic, which does have the massive carrying capacity, but also acts as a command ship and a frontline battleship with its massive weapons. And yeah, the rest now we do know that other ships like uh, Halcyons, which we're going to get into, as well as the frigates, do have substantial carrying capacities. But those will primarily be used as screening and support, and they'll only actually start carrying troops from these to the landing zone as basically used as large landing craft to keep these ships flexible. Because I mean, in the case that you have to lose some ships, you'd much rather lose those smaller ships than these, especially the Punic. So those ships will be used kind of as transferring or large landing landing craft, while these ships stay safe out of harm's way, um, and continue carrying out the mission. Alrighty, folks, I now brought out the cruisers, and again, you can see just how much the Punic dwarfs them in size. Punic's 4 kilometers long. The Halcyons are 1171 meters, and the Valiants, I believe, are somewhere around 1536 meters. So yeah, it's massive scale difference. I mean, two Valiants and one Halcyon are barely enough to cover the length of the Punic. Never mind, the Punic's a lot larger, taller, more bulky. So it just shows you just the massive amount of resources that goes into each one of these giant supercarriers. Now, the purpose of these ships, I talked about the Valiant a bit later, as they have the assets of a command ship, but they also have the heavy firepower of a cruiser, which would be very useful, as I believe that the cruisers, the Valiants, have the highest firepower of any ship, with exception to the Punic. They have greater firepower than the Spirit of Fire, than the Phoenix-class salt carriers or the frigates, and I think they also have greater firepower than the Epoch. So uh, this really makes them as the main damage dealing as well as command components for the fleet. And we of course have the Halcyons. Halcyons still have substantial firepower, especially when used together, either with each other or with the rest of the fleet. But the main value they have is they have large carrying capacities, as we can see for the Pillar of Autumn, which is actually one of the original um, halcyons with the internal honeycombs. Most halcyons did not have those, which meant that they actually had even more internal space. So these will primarily be used to transfer troops from the assault carriers and supercarrier closer to the front, so that those ships are um, more protected. But they also have massive firepower to help protect the fleet and yeah, take down enemy ships, and definitely more than enough to support the ground invasion. And so yeah, I got 6 cruisers total, which I think is sufficient for a fleet of like 30 to 50 ships. Um, and yeah, they got their own designated roles. The main roles would be for the Valiant would be to command smaller fleets. Um, I'll get into the breakdown of the actual fleets a little later, but and yeah, the main role of the Halcyon would be to act as a basically as the main firepower and backbone of a fleet below a command ship, whether that command ship be the Punic, the Valiant, or the Epoch. Alrighty, folks. Last to show here is the frigates. I talked about them a little initially, but what I'll go over is the fact that number one, they're so small, and number two, they are quite a few of them. So over here, I got 10 piles of 4 ships each. I don't know why, but to me, at least, the way the ships are designed, it makes it look like there's a lot more than 4 of them in each pile. But yeah, so that gives me a total of 40 frigates. Now, I'm going to go, the way I designed this initially is I'd only have 20 frigates initially with the fleet. The other 20 would be as a reserve. And my thinking behind this is that this is like, say, late war or post-war UNSC operations in a certain area. I don't know, there's some coveys or some insurrectionists working together that need to get wiped out. Problem is, we're a bit cash strapped, and we're running out of capital ships. So our capital ships here, our carriers, supercarriers, cruisers, and such, are in short supply. So we only have these for the operation, and these are essentially irreplaceable, at least for now. But we do have a lot of frigates being built, so you start out with 20, but there's more being built. So if you need to replace them, you can, and that way I have 20 extra as a reserve. And if I lose a frigate, I'll replace it. If I lose a cruiser, I'll replace it with 4 frigates. If I lose a Valiant, I'll replace it with probably 6 or 8, and the Epoch probably gets 10. If I lose, the Phoenixes or the Punic, well, that's really bad. So maybe call off the operation. If I lose the Valiant, or sorry, if I lose the Punic, I meant. But yeah, and so these frigates, they turned out really well. I'm really glad none of them snapped in half, which does happen a lot with these designs because the next section is so fragile, which makes sense why the Covenant targeted so much. And yeah, I have them distributed all across the fleet. I'll go into the fleet breakdown maybe in another episode. But yeah, so this is my 3D printed fleet. 50 ships. It's got one Punic as the command ship, as the flagship. It's got one Epoch, two Valiants, two Phoenixes, four Halcyons, and 40, 20 plus another 20 optional Paris-class frigates. And they all work together, designed to carry and protect and support a Marine expeditionary force to bring, I don't know, justice to the Covenant and death to the Yennies. I don't know. Thanks a lot for watching, and I also wanted to bring up what's been recently going on with my channel. I just passed 50 subscribers. I guess I didn't pass me yet, but 50 subscribers and 2,000 views. I think now I'm around 2,100. Most of that was thanks to, first of all, just a steady growth, at least when it came to subscribers. But when it came to views, was just a massive jump I got from the Trump rally at Phoenix. And I just like to thank all of you guys so much for all your support, watching my videos, making them blow up. I mean, one video, part 6, I believe, has like 300 views now, 400 views, which I mean, it's just blowing up. I thank you guys so much for that. Now this will be my first semi-professionally made video. I hope. I'll try to get a proper thumbnail. I'll try to get a little bit of editing with this one. Maybe you guys can recommend me some good, cheap editing software I could use, audio software. And yeah, thank you very much for everything. Hopefully this will be the start of a new chapter in my YouTube channel. Yeah, keep on rocking.